Hello, I have Dipen Rughani and Natasha Jha Bhaskar from Newland Global Group here. Thank you so much for being available for a quick chat. So Dipen, can you please share what your role is as a CEO of Newland Global?
Yeah, so Newland Global Group is an advisory firm that focuses on trade and investment between India and Australia. And our aim is to simplify doing business with India. So we're often India is seen as a very large market and, very diverse and very complex. And so we try to simplify that particular market, depending on the industry sectors that we focus on. So we have 5 industry sectors that we focus on: mining and resources, METS is part of the mining resources, which is mining equipment technology services, and our real focus at this time is critical minerals because of renewable energy, electric vehicles, energy storage, and those kind of sectors. The second one is advanced manufacturing, and we're looking at where we can take Australian IP into India to joint venture with Indian companies, or we can take Australian manufacturers to set up shop in India and take advantage of the Make in India campaign, which is being promoted globally by the Indian government. The third sector is healthcare. And so we focus on research and development and biotechnology in Australia, which is very strong. Mm-hmm. And we introduce those the research and technologies and IPs into Indian pharmaceutical companies. We also get into medical equipment. We also focus on sports. We manage Allan Border. We have Ravi Shastri on our board, and we also partner with a very large company called JSW Sports in India, which owns the Bengaluru soccer team, the Haryana Kabaddi team, the Delhi Capitals IPL team. They sponsor about 100 athletes, one of which is Neeraj Chopra, the javelin thrower that won the gold medal at the Olympics. And so these are the sectors. We do dabble in fintech, edtech, agri-tech, and a little bit of agriculture and fertilizers, but that's what we do.
Thank you for breaking that down in a nutshell. And Wells, cricket and India is definitely synonymous. So
Absolutely.
Sounds great that you're managing Allan Border. Wow. So Natasha, what's your role as the General Manager for Newland Global Group, and how has today's seminar actually benefited what you do to spur on growth in trade?
Thanks, Steve. That's a great question. So I would say that primarily, the times that we are living in, Australia-India bilateral relations have really peaked in a big way since the signing of the Australia-India Economic Cooperation Trade Agreement, something that was hanging for the last 10 years. And now the energy, the momentum, the enthusiasm among stakeholders on both sides, be it India, be it Australia, has really gone up. Now, how this will really translate from intent to outcome depends on how we actually as stakeholders make this happen. And that's where summits like these really play a very big role. Now, Australia-India International Business Summit, the first of its kind, happening here in Sydney, and with sessions across different sectors, showcases the opportunities across India and Australia that exists across various sectors. So it's not just in one area where the opportunity is today. There are so many areas. It's just for stakeholders to understand how they can really maximize on the potential that exists. Now, in my role at Newland Global Group, and as Dipen mentioned, there's quite a bit that we do across different sectors. My role is primarily to focus more on the policy side of it, on the advocacy, as well as also try and identify that how does our advisory work is informed by the engagements that we have with companies. So a large component of our work is also around narrative, because how we understand India, how new India is different from old India, what has really changed in terms of different sectors, opportunities. And that's a message which is very important for Australian corporates to understand, because that's based on anecdotes, that's based on prejudices, that's based on a visit that would have happened 15 years ago, 20 years ago. India is changing by the day. It's a very dynamic market. Any South Asian market is. But this is a market where, as the Invest India CEO today said, billion mobiles, billion biometrics. So we are talking in large numbers. The opportunity is huge. And that's where Australian corporates have to understand this. And Newland Global Group, our focus is to really bridge that divide that exists and create the kind of connections, build in insights, capabilities within organizations, within industries to realize the India opportunity and also get in the Australian stakeholders a sense of the new India.
Thank you so much. I think a prime example is Disney Plus getting into the Indian market and overtaking Netflix is one prime example of how breaking into the Indian market can be so beneficial. So what are the main barriers that you notice, apart from those systemic prejudices and things that both cultures are moving forward from now? I mean, sentiments definitely change in regards to Indian investment. Before it was all about Adjani coal mines and things like that. So what are you finding are the main barriers? Is it language?
Look, I think the barriers at the moment, when you look at Australia and India, are the lack of knowledge. The lack of knowledge in the case of India, you've got 28 states. And, how do these states operate? They're very different from each other. Language, politics, culture, religion, festivities, etc. And so the education, the narrative that Natasha spoke about, we did a lot of work on informing and educating. So, we've done a lot of seminars webinars on industry-specific sectors. We've done the Australia-India conversations with industry stakeholders and senior stakeholders between the two countries. And so that process for us, the change of narrative and the education and the information has already started 2 years ago because we felt the change then. Fortunately, with the signing of the AI ECTA in April this year, now Australia has actually woken up to that. I guess the aggression of China, the geopolitical sort of changes across the world, and particularly in the Indo-Pacific, and the movements in the supply chain, where you now need to have health security, in regards to products that you manufacture in country. For example, Australia struggled with vaccines, so they now have to look at that health security in the future because pandemics are here to stay, right? So manufacturing is going to be coming back here in the very important strategic areas for Australia. What is India looking at? I mean, when you look at India, it's evolved so much, as Natasha said, and we're looking at Australia's strengths and India's aspirations. So where can Australia really help India to grow and meet its aspirations? And that's why we picked the 5 industry sectors that I mentioned earlier before. And it's all about education. It's all about information. And once we've got through that, we now need to look at finishing off the comprehensive economic cooperation agreement of the full FTA, which needs to cover services, it needs to cover investment, it needs to cover agriculture, and a lot of other areas at the moment. Now, you know that it's been signed, but it still hasn't been ratified at Parliament. It needs to be ratified. Earlier, you and I had a conversation about how the previous government had allocated $280 million to the India relationship. Now, that hasn't been ratified, right? There is $30 million allocated to the Centre for Australia-India Relations. No one knows where that's going to be sitting, whether it's going to be Canberra, Melbourne, Sydney, Perth, who knows, right? So there's a lot more momentum that needs to continue, right? And I think once that is done, we've just recently come back from India where we've assisted the Western Australian government that had a business delegation there of 75 businesses with 110 people in 4 different cities, 2 in the north and 2 in the south. And, the excitement of these companies, the reception from the Indian companies was phenomenal. The energy was palpable. And that's what India is all about. So we need to get more Australian companies out there and educate them.
Yes, thank you so much for your insights. So is there any difference between what currency is used for the investment? Does it benefit Australians to use Australian dollars over US dollars or the Indian rupiah? Does that make a difference?
It's inconsequential at the moment. I think, when you're looking at investments, financial instruments, in this day and age, electronic funds transfer and things like that. US dollars obviously is used in trade, but investments, I guess, if an Indian company is investing in Australia, you'd have to somehow convert the rupees or the US dollar into Aussie dollars. Or if an Australian company is investing into India, you'll have to somehow convert the Aussie dollars or US dollars into Indian rupees. It's not an issue.
So Australia is quite a new country as well, considerably, compared to India, of course, and we're diversifying more now. So I'm seeing some similarities there. Like for energy, for example, we need to use ancient wisdoms with advanced technology to sustain life on this planet. So how do you think Australia and India can work to benefit, the climate and the earth in general?
So there's quite a, in terms of synergies that at this stage we are witnessing, and that's not just in the energy space, but across different sectors, be it the med tech or be it the agri tech, or for that matter, as you mentioned, clean energy. Within clean energy, the government has also come out with different sort of frameworks. We have seen a critical minerals consortium that's in place, again, with the focus on how do you really promote clean energy engagements and technology, because that's where, I would say Australia's competitive advantages are. And India at this stage, with the goal of cutting emissions by 2070, and that's true for all the countries which are at this stage struggling to, live up to their commitments. Important is that what really can be harnessed across different countries, and there has to be, in a way, a sort of an engagement where these countries come together and share technologies. And as has been mentioned about the supply chain resilience initiative and also the Indo-Pacific economic framework through Quad, the focus is on really building on those collaborations and coalitions. But coming back to the question also which you asked earlier on drivers, and very rightly said by Dipen, on the knowledge gap that exists between Australian corporates, one thing which we personally feel, and through our experiences advising companies, is that you've got to mainstream the India story. It can't be just in specific events where we talk about India opportunity or the aspiration that we have for the India market. It has to be repeated all the time. It has to be discussed all the time for this to be part of our, business discussions, board level discussions, that how we actually get into the India market, what we should be doing right. And that at this stage is still, even in terms of leadership in boards, we don't see people with Indian expertise. We don't see people with Asian expertise for that matter. And that's a discussion which we need to really, focus on now to get the right skills for people to educate the other board members, the other companies, that this is an opportunity, this is the market, and you need to get into this market.
Absolutely. I think from an Australian perspective, the focus has been on Chinese business relations, and now it's great to see that it's expanding into another global power, India. Before you go, I think it's a very important point that you mentioned about the narrative changing, because the media plays a very important part in that. The narrative has been around charity and how Australia and the West can help India with charity. How do you think more investment into this industry is going to change that? Do you think it'll still benefit the charities, or do you think this is going to supersede that?
Oh, that's a good question. Now, from a charitable perspective, this morning I was speaking about how India has evolved in the 75 years from independence, 1947 to today. And, in the 1950s, India was receiving food from other countries from a charitable perspective. Today, India is an exporter of food and agriculture, right? When you look at in 1947, the average income for a person was $3. Today, it's $2,200 in India, right? So you can see how it's come forward in leaps and bounds. And when you look at charities, I always use the example of the British Trust. Now, they invest a lot of money in India. Investing meaning they donate a lot of money. Now, what happens is that once they've done that, it actually helps business. So some time ago, I was assisting some Australian education institutes, and they came up against British education institutes to bid for some work. Now, because that $17 million was donated by the British Council into India, into India's education, it was easier for the UK-based British companies to win that deal than it was for the Australian companies. So there is a role for charities to play here. AusAid, Australian Aid, and there are a number of other charities that are smaller that are operating in India from Australia. And they do a decent job, but they're under the radar. And I think media and other organizations could actually elevate what they're doing and show the world, in fact, not just Australia, and in fact India, what Australian companies are doing as far as charitable work they're doing in India.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights today. I really do appreciate your time. Is there anything you'd like to share about what your work at Newland Global Group is involved with this seminar before we close off?
Our collaboration at this stage, and of course, Dipen has been the former chair of the Australia-India Business Council. So he's had, in terms of advisory and really bringing in that component and trying to guide the leadership, that how the Business Council can really build those strong engagements across states, and also getting in the Indian stakeholders. We've been trying to bring in people and trying to tell more people about this particular International Business Summit and the potential that these summits really bring in to take the opportunity forward. But at the core of it, what lies and what's come out also through different discussions today is that results and relationships are really going to drive forward this relationship. And we need to focus on that, how in terms of building on the bilateral ties, we have to focus on both these components, people to people as well as business to business, and that actually is the theme of this International Business Summit as well. So let's see what more we can achieve. This is the best time. This is the peak that we are witnessing in Australia-India bilateral relations, and time is just to translate it into reality.
Thank you so much, Natasha. I mean, I do understand that the status level here of the people is very high. I must say I was nervous coming today, but just how approachable everyone is and relevant has been very encouraging. And I think that's the most important thing, that everyone's relevant to what's going on in the world instead of sitting in the ivory towers.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.